Welcome back to Twisted Tales of Murder. On the night of May 4th, 2001, the quiet streets of Studio City, California, were shattered by two gunshots. Robert Blake, the Emmy-winning star of the hit TV series Beretta, had just finished dinner with his wife, Bonny Lee, Bakley, at his favorite haunt, Vitello's Italian restaurant. According to Blake's account, the couple walked to their car, but he realized he had left his licensed .38 caliber handgun inside the restaurant. He told police he returned to the restaurant to retrieve it, leaving Bonny alone in the passenger seat of their Dodge Stealth. When he returned, he found a scene of horror. Bonny had been shot in the head and shoulder. Blake frantically banged on the door of a nearby resident, Sean Stanek, begging for help. Stanek later described a massive amount of blood everywhere. Bonny Lee Bakley, aged 44, was pronounced dead at the hospital. It was a story that read like a movie script, but for Bonny, it was the final chapter of a life defined by a desperate, lifelong quest for fame. But before we dive into one of Hollywood's coldest cases, take a moment to like and subscribe so you don't miss any other twisted tales of murder. Bonny Lee Bakley was born in Morristown, New Jersey, and from a young age, she was obsessed with becoming a celebrity. Her childhood friend, Christina Shire, recalled that Bonny wanted to be on TV so that everyone who grew up with her would finally notice her. Her path to Hollywood was unconventional and often troubled. By the age of 21, she married a relative, Paul Garin, with whom she had 2 children. They were only married for 5 years, but it was the longest of all of her marriages, as her gaze was always fixed on stars. She developed an obsession with Jerry Lee Lewis. She even moved to Memphis in the 1980s in the attempt to pursue him. She once famously sashayed into Lewis's sister's home, playing striptease music, and began to undress, hoping to get an audience with the rock and roll legend. Bonny even claimed she was pregnant with Lewis's child, but a DNA test proved otherwise. This was a pattern that would repeat. Bonny took her obsession with celebrities to a new level. She stalked celebrities like Frankie Valli and Tom Jones, and she believed that she had to sleep her way to the top to become famous. While chasing fame, Bonny funded her lifestyle through a lucrative and coldly calculated scam. She placed ads in porno and Lonely Hearts magazines, luring men into sending her cash in exchange for nude photos. One of her victims was 73-year-old William Weber. After a week of marriage, Bonny disappeared from his life, allegedly walking off with $80,000 and leaving the elderly man heartbroken. Her sister, Marjorie Smith, noted that Bonny was bullied as a child and grew up in a troubled home with an alcoholic father, which may have contributed to her behavior toward men. Then in 1999, Bonny met Robert Blake at a jazz club. At the same time, she was involved with Christian Brando, the son of Hollywood icon Marlon Brando. When Bonny became pregnant, she initially told Brando the child was his, even naming the baby girl after him. However, a paternity test confirmed that Robert Blake was the biological father. Blake, a man described as a Hollywood loner with a bad temper, decided to marry Bakley for the sake of the child, Rose Lenore. The marriage was far from a fairy tale. They lived in separate residences on Blake's property. He in the main house he called the bunker, and she in a small bungalow. The morning after the murder, police found the murder weapon in a trash bin about 5 meters from the car. It was a World War II era 9mm Walther P-38 Luger. The serial number had been filed off, and there were no fingerprints found on it. Suspicion immediately fell on Blake. Detectives uncovered what they called a shopping list of items in the car of Blake's handyman, Earl Caldwell, which included shovels, a sledgehammer, old rugs, duct tape, and lye. prosecutors believed Blake had spent months trying to hire hitmen to do the job for him. Two retired stuntmen, Gary McClarty and Ronald Duffy Hambleton, claimed Blake had approached them to take care of his wife. To understand why this case was so difficult to prosecute, we have to look at the gunshot residue evidence. Detectives swabbed Blake's hands about 2.5 hours after the shooting and found about 5 particles of GSR. This sounds like a smoking gun, but the defense countered with a devastating argument. An expert testified that if Blake had actually fired the Walther P-38, he should have had closer to 100 particles on his hands, not 5. Furthermore, the handling of the evidence was criticized as incompetent. Blake's clothing was stored in an open cardboard box in the trunk of a police car for over 48 hours before being properly packaged, creating a massive risk for cross-contamination. The defense argued that the few particles found could have come from Blake's own licensed .38 revolver, which he was carrying that night. The criminal trial began in 2004 with high stakes. Blake's defense attorney, M. Gerald Schwartzbach, used cutting-edge courtroom technology to highlight failures in the police investigation. They used a program called Trial Director to zoom in on photos of detectives failing to follow protocol. A major pivot point in the trial was the use of a Barbara Walters 2020 interview. Because Blake did not testify in his own defense, his lawyers played the video of him proclaiming his innocence to Walters, essentially allowing him to testify without being cross-examined. On March 16, 2005, the jury delivered a shocking verdict: not guilty. The jury foreman stated that prosecutors simply could not put the gun in Blake's hand. If Blake didn't do it, who did? The defense pointed toward Christian Brando. Brando had a violent history and was reportedly furious when he learned Bonny had lied about the paternity of her child. In a recorded phone call, Brando was heard telling Bonny, "You're lucky somebody ain't out there to put a bullet in your head." During a civil trial following the acquittal, Brando invoked his Fifth Amendment rights over 24 times. At one point, jurors reported that Brando pointed at Blake and silently mouthed the word guilty. While Blake was free of criminal charges, the civil justice system told a different story. In late 2005, Bakley's children won a wrongful death lawsuit against him. A jury found Blake liable for her death and ordered him to pay $30 million. This judgment forced the once wealthy actor into bankruptcy, and he ended his days living a much more modest life, even working as a ranch hand for a time. In the center of this storm was a child, Rose Lenore. Raised by her half-sister, Delina, Rose lived a life away from the spotlight for nearly 2 decades. In 2019, she finally spoke out, describing her childhood as traumatic. Rose revealed that she didn't even know where her mother was buried for years because she wasn't ready to face the truth. Now, pursuing an acting career of her own, she is reconnected with Blake, though she refers to him as Robert rather than Dad. Robert Blake died in 2023 at the age of 89, maintaining his innocence until the end. Bonny Lee Bakley finally achieved the fame she so desperately craved, but only in death as the victim of a crime that remains officially unsolved. To understand the complexity of the evidence in this case, think of a shattered mirror. Each piece, the GSR, the hitman testimony, the Brando tapes, reflects a different version of the truth. But when you try to put them back together, the cracks remain, leaving us with a picture that is forever distorted and incomplete. Who really killed Bonny Lee Bakley? It's possible the only person who knew the full truth took it to the grave, the loner from Beretta. Until next time, stay safe.